The piercing shriek of the medical alarm ripped through the suffocating silence of the afternoon, instantly overriding the low thrum of the dying air conditioner. My heart seized, a cold dread washing over me that had nothing to do with the oppressive, record-breaking heat baking our otherwise idyllic suburban home. It was the sound of a lifeline severing, the last gasp of power to the machine keeping my precious Leo alive. Just moments before, the television had flickered, the lights had dimmed, and then, with a soft pop, everything had gone dark. Not just the house, but Leo's ventilator, the rhythmic hiss and sigh that had been the comforting soundtrack to our lives for his entire 5 years, had faltered, then ceased entirely. Leo, my brave, beautiful boy, lay still, his small chest barely rising and falling on its own, his rare respiratory illness demanding the constant assistance of that very machine. Panic, hot and sharp, clawed at my throat as I lunged for the ventilator, my fingers fumbling for the backup battery indicator. A single, blinking red light confirmed my worst fears. The emergency power was engaged, but it was already ticking. Down. A cruel countdown to an unthinkable reality. How could this be happening? How could they have done this? This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a death sentence waiting to unfold. Our neighborhood, Liberty Estates, was ironically named for its suffocating rules and regulations, enforced by an HOA that wielded its power like an iron fist. It was supposed to be a haven of perfectly manicured lawns and compliant residents. But for me, Sarah, a single mother struggling to keep afloat, it had become a gilded cage. The conflict had been brewing for months, a slow, agonizing drip of dread that I'd tried desperately to ignore. It began, innocently enough, with a notice about unpaid HOA dues. What they didn't know, or perhaps chose to ignore, was the brutal financial storm I'd been weathering. My part-time job as a freelance graphic designer had evaporated when a major client went under, leaving me scrambling. On top of that, Leo's already astronomical medical bills had surged unexpectedly after a particularly rough bout of pneumonia, swallowing what little savings I had left. Every spare penny went towards Leo's specialized care, his medications, his therapies. The HOA dues, while not exorbitant on their own, became an impossible luxury. I'd sent them countless emails, made phone calls that went unreturned, and even written heartfelt letters explaining Leo's critical condition and his absolute dependence on the ventilator. I'd pleaded for understanding, for a payment plan, for just a little grace. Each time, their response was cold, impersonal, a stark reminder of their unyielding bureaucracy. Dues are due. Failure to comply will result in penalties, including utility disruption. I had even explicitly warned them, in writing, that cutting our power would endanger a life, explaining the ventilator and its necessity. Their only reply was another automated notice, a final, chilling threat delivered less than 24 hours ago. I'd spent that night tossing and turning, clinging to the desperate hope that they wouldn't actually go through with it, that humanity would prevail over policy. But now, with the silent, sweltering air pressing in and Leo's labored breaths, filling the terrifying void where the machine's hum used to be, that hope had evaporated into the oppressive heat. The digital display on the backup battery was now flashing. Critical. 15 minutes remaining. My hands trembled, the reality of their callous act hitting me with the force of a physical blow. They truly didn't care. And now, my son's life was on the line, dangling by the fragile thread of a rapidly dying battery. The ventilator's desperate beeping intensified, each pulse a hammer blow against Sarah's chest. Leo's shallow breaths were becoming visibly strained, his small body struggling against the suffocating heat that now filled the house. The air, thick and still, felt like a physical weight pressing down on them. No, Leo. Not now, Sarah whispered, her voice a ragged plea. She knelt beside him, instinctively rubbing his chest, trying to remember every first aid lesson she'd ever learned, every emergency drill the nurses had taught her. The humidifier connected to the ventilator, usually a gentle mist, now spluttered weakly, then died. His lips, already parched from the heat, looked drier. Every ounce of her being screamed at her to fix it, to find a solution, but her mind was a whirlwind of terror. The backup battery's display now flashed a grim, critical 5 minutes. 5 minutes until the primary life support for her son ceased to function. Her phone was already in her hand, her fingers flying across the keypad, dialing the HOA's emergency line for the 3rd time. The automated message, polite and infuriatingly calm, chirped back. "Thank you for calling Liberty Estates Homeowners Association. Our offices are currently closed. For non-emergency inquiries, please visit our website. For emergencies, please call back during business hours, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sarah's breath hitched. Business hours? Her son was dying. She slammed the phone down, then immediately redialed, punching 0 repeatedly, hoping to bypass the automated maze. Nothing. Just endless loops of synthesized politeness. She tried the personal cell numbers she'd painstakingly collected for board members over the years, from seemingly friendly encounters at neighborhood picnics. First, Mrs. Albright, head of the architectural committee, straight to voicemail. Then Mr. Henderson, the treasurer. His phone rang, then disconnected. He'd probably seen her number and ignored it. The sheer, audacious callousness of it all sent a fresh wave of fury through her. They knew. She had told them, and they still chose this. "Leo, hold on, baby, just a little longer," she murmured, tears blurring her vision. She pulled the small, portable manual resuscitator from Leo's emergency kit, positioning it over his mouth and nose. Each squeeze of the bag was a desperate prayer, forcing air into his tiny lungs. It was exhausting, imprecise, and she knew it couldn't last. Her arms would give out, and even then, it wasn't the steady, regulated flow of air his compromised lungs truly needed. The room was heating up exponentially, the walls radiating stored sunlight. Sweat plastered her hair to her forehead, dripping into her eyes. Leo's skin felt flushed, hotter than before. He coughed, a weak, rattling sound that tore at her soul. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice finally answered. Sarah gasped, trying to steady her voice. "My son, he's on a ventilator, and the HOA cut our power during a heat wave. The battery's almost dead. He can't breathe without it." The dispatcher was sympathetic but measured. "Ma'am, I understand this is distressing. We can send paramedics for a medical emergency, but we cannot restore power. That's a utility issue, or an HOA issue." Sarah's voice rose. "But it is a medical emergency. He's dying. Can't you just make them turn it back on?" The dispatcher apologized, explaining. Jurisdiction, offering to dispatch an ambulance for transport to a hospital. But the closest hospital with pediatric respiratory care was 30 minutes away, and the thought of moving Leo, disconnecting him entirely from the ventilator in this heat, was another terrifying gamble. What if the ambulance got stuck in traffic? What if his condition worsened during transport? She declined, for now, desperate to find a solution right here, right now. Her gaze swept around the garage, a frantic search for anything that could generate power. She remembered seeing a small generator at old Mr. Davies's house down the street, who dabbled in amateur radio. Hope, thin and fleeting, flared. But then she remembered his recent bypass surgery. He wouldn't be home. Next door, the Millers were on vacation. Her eyes landed on the old dusty car battery charger tucked away in a corner. Could she somehow connect it to the ventilator? Her mind raced through half-remembered physics lessons from high school, quickly realizing the folly. The voltage would be wrong, the power unstable. It would likely fry the sensitive electronics, making things worse. It was a stupid, desperate thought. There was no spare car battery, no inverter to convert DC to AC. She had no generator, no fuel for one, no extension cords long enough if she found one. The vast, self-sufficient suburban dream suddenly felt like a trap. Every option she considered, every avenue she explored, led to a dead end. The heat was relentless, a physical oppression. Leo's cries had become weaker, his breaths shallower, each one a struggle. The manual resuscitator was growing heavier in her hands. The battery indicator on the ventilator had finally gone dark. Silence, profound and terrifying, descended on the room. Only the sound of her own ragged breathing and Leo's increasingly labored gasps filled the void. Her options had truly run out. Despair, cold and heavy, settled over her. They had done this, the HOA. And now she was alone, watching her son fight for every breath, powerless in a home without power. The emergency manual resuscitator was now her entire world, each pump a desperate prayer, each gasp from Leo a fresh stab of terror. Her arms ached, her shoulders burned, but she couldn't stop. The air in the house was thick, stifling, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on them both. Her phone, once a tool for connection, now felt like a dead weight, useless for calling emergency services or reasoning with the unfeeling bureaucracy of the HOA. But then, a thought, born of pure desperation, sparked in her exhausted mind: social media. It was a long shot, a Hail Mary. But what did she have to lose? Leo was fading. With shaking fingers, Sarah navigated to her Facebook account. Her vision was blurred with sweat and tears, but clarity of purpose sharpened her resolve. She didn't bother with eloquence, just raw, unvarnished truth. She snapped a quick, blurry photo of Leo, tiny and vulnerable, connected to the unresponsive ventilator, then another of the dark, unmoving fan in the corner, a symbol of their powerlessness. Her fingers flew across the screen, tapping out a message that bled her fear and fury onto the digital canvas. Urgent help needed. My son, Leo, is 5 years old and on a ventilator for a severe respiratory illness. Our HOA, Liberty Estates, just cut our power for unpaid dues during a record heat wave. They knew about Leo's condition. They knew the ventilator is life support. The backup battery is dead. I am manually breathing for my child. The heat is unbearable. We need power. Now. Please, someone, anyone, help us. This is a matter of life and death. She posted it without a second thought, the words a guttural scream into the digital void, then dropped the phone, returning to the relentless rhythm of manually breathing for Leo. The initial response was slow, a trickle of shocked emojis and hesitant comments, a few well-meaning but powerless thoughts and prayers. Then a sharp, indignant message from Mrs. Jenkins, her next-door neighbor, usually reserved and polite, but a fierce advocate when roused. Sarah, is this true? I saw your post. My God, I'm coming over with batteries for your portable oxygen. And my car has an inverter. We'll find a way. A flicker of hope. Minutes later, there was a tentative knock on the door. Mrs. Jenkins, her face etched with concern, stood there with a bag full of heavy-duty battery packs and a portable car inverter. It's not much, but maybe we can power something small. Keep the ventilator going for a bit, she whispered, her eyes wide with alarm as she saw Leo. It was a temporary fix, a fragile bridge, but it was something. As Mrs. Jenkins helped set up the inverter to power a small cooling fan near Leo, Sarah's phone started to buzz incessantly. The post wasn't just getting traction, it was exploding. Shares multiplied, comments piled up, many from strangers, expressing outrage, offering support, demanding action. Then a message popped up with an unfamiliar name, Alex Chen, followed by local news reporter Channel 7. His message was direct. Sarah, I saw your post. This is unconscionable. I want to come to your home immediately and cover this story. Are you willing to speak on camera?" Sarah's first instinct was to say no. Her life was private, her grief sacred. But then she looked at Leo, struggling, even with Mrs. Jenkins's makeshift fan providing some relief, and the rage at the HOA flared again. This wasn't about her privacy. It was about exposing their cruelty, about fighting for her son's life. "Yes," she typed back, her fingers steady now. "Come. The sooner, the better." Within minutes of Alex Chen's message, the HOA's counterattack began. Her phone rang with an unknown number. When she answered, a cold, authoritative voice, clearly belonging to an HOA official, barked, "Ms. Miller, we have seen your libelous and defamatory remarks on social media. We demand you remove that post immediately. You are violating community guidelines and potentially facing legal action." Sarah's temper, frayed to breaking point, snapped. "Libelous? My son is dying because you cut our power. I warned you. What's libelous about the truth?" The voice remained unyielding. "Your outstanding dues are a matter of record. This is a contractual dispute, not an emergency. If the post is not removed within the hour, our legal team will be in touch." Sarah hung up, shaking with fury. They weren't just indifferent. They were actively trying to silence her, to bury the truth under threats and legal jargon. But the tide had turned. Just as the HOA's threatening call ended, the distinct hum of a news van pulling up outside echoed through the sweltering silence of her home. Through the front window, Sarah saw a Channel 7 van, its satellite dish glinting in the relentless sun, followed by what looked like another car. Alex Chen and his crew were here. Hope surged through her, stronger than ever, but it was a fragile hope. Her house was still dark, still suffocating. Leo's shallow breaths were still a harrowing reminder of the ticking clock. The power was still off. The camera lights, if they had power, would illuminate her desperate reality, but they wouldn't turn the ventilator back on. The stakes, already impossibly high, had just been raised for the whole world to see. The moment Alex Chen's segment hit the local news, it was like striking a match in a dry forest. Sarah's raw, tear-streaked plea, Leo's fragile breathing, and the damning evidence of the HOA's callousness ignited an inferno of public outrage. Within an hour, her initial Facebook post had tens of thousands of shares. The hashtag #HelpLeo trended not just locally, but nationally. News channels across the country picked up the story, interviewing furious neighbors and legal experts who condemned the HOA's actions as unconscionable. Donations poured into a quickly set-up GoFundMe for Leo's medical expenses, but more importantly, messages of solidarity flooded Sarah's phone. The story wasn't just about unpaid dues. It was about a powerful, unfeeling bureaucracy crushing a vulnerable family. Outside her window, the quiet suburban street transformed. Cars, usually respectful of speed limits, now crawled past, their occupants staring, some honking in support. Soon, a small crowd began to gather. Neighbors, then complete strangers from nearby towns, driven by a shared sense of injustice. They held hastily made signs: "Power for Leo," "Ho, heartless, life over dues." A spontaneous protest erupted, growing by the minute, fueled by the live news coverage that continuously streamed from Sarah's house. Chants of turn it on," echoed through the sweltering air, their collective fury a powerful counterpoint to the suffocating heat inside her home. Meanwhile, inside, Mrs. Jenkins diligently fanned Leo, while Sarah remained glued to the news, horrifying updates on Leo's vital signs from a medic who had joined them after hearing the story. "His oxygen saturation is dipping again, Sarah. We need to get him to a hospital, or get that ventilator back on full power. These batteries won't hold out much longer for the full function he needs." The words were a stark reminder that, despite the growing public support, the immediate danger to Leo hadn't diminished. The makeshift setup was barely holding. The HOA, previously silent and dismissive, was now in full-blown panic. Their phones were ringing off the hook, their social media channels flooded with venomous comments. The pressure mounted. Internal. Divisions surely surfacing. Late in the afternoon, their PR firm, clearly desperate, issued a statement. It was a masterpiece of deflection. Liberty Estates, HOA, is deeply saddened by the situation. We strictly adhere to community covenants and bylaws. We have repeatedly attempted to contact the resident regarding outstanding dues. This is a complex matter, and we prioritize the safety and well-being of all residents. It was a feeble attempt to quell the storm, only serving to fan the flames of public anger further. "Complex matter?" scoffed a commenter on live TV. "A child is dying, you monsters." As dusk began to settle, a massive crowd had assembled outside the HOA's main office a few blocks away. The local news had announced that an emergency HOA board meeting was underway, pressured by a flurry of calls from local politicians. Sarah, though weak with exhaustion, knew she had to be there. Mrs. Jenkins stayed with Leo, promising to call instantly if anything changed. Alex Chen, seeing her resolve, offered to drive her, setting up for a live cross. "Are you ready for this, Sarah?" he asked, his eyes conveying respect. "Ready to fight," she replied, her voice hoarse but firm. The HOA meeting room was a pressure cooker. The air was thick with tension, not heat, as the board members sat grim-faced, their faces reflecting discomfort under the glare of TV lights and the furious stares of a handful of brave residents who had pushed their way inside. Sarah, standing beside Alex Chen, was given the floor. Her voice, trembling at first, gained strength with every word. She didn't shout. She spoke with a quiet, burning conviction that pierced the silence. "You call this a complex matter? My son is fighting for every breath because of your bylaws. I told you he was on life support. I begged you for help. You chose to value your regulations over a child's life." She detailed the battery status, the manual resuscitation, the terror. "Is this what community safety looks like?" she challenged, her gaze sweeping over their uncomfortable faces. Mr. Peterson, the HOA president, a man usually puffed with self-importance, stammered, "Ms. Miller, we acted according to procedure. We regret any unforeseen consequences." Unforeseen consequences. Sarah's voice rose, a raw, primal scream. "My son's death is an unforeseen consequence to you. You put a price tag on his life." The room erupted with shouts of agreement from the public. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. A prominent civil rights attorney drawn by the viral story stepped forward. "Members of the board, I'm here on behalf of Ms. Miller. Your actions constitute gross negligence, potentially reckless endangerment, and a clear violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. If power is not restored to her property within the next 15 minutes, we will be filing an immediate injunction, pursuing criminal charges where applicable, and initiating a class action lawsuit for every resident impacted by your egregious conduct." His words, precise and chilling, hit with the force of a hammer. The board members exchanged panicked glances, their PR rep frantically whispering in their ears. The ultimatum hung in the air. The clock was ticking, not just on the attorney's deadline, but on Leo's failing health. Sarah's phone buzzed, with an urgent text from Mrs. Jenkins. "Leo's fading. We need full power. Now." Sarah looked at the HOA board, her eyes silently pleading, demanding. Mr. Peterson, his face pale, cleared his throat. We will comply. Power will be restored immediately." The words were out, a forced concession. But the lights in her home were still dark and Leo was still fighting. The fight wasn't over until the current flowed. The air in the oppressive HOA meeting room crackled with tension, the attorney's ultimatum hanging heavy, when Sarah's phone, clutched tightly in her hand, vibrated with an incoming call from Mrs. Jenkins. Her heart leaped into her throat, bracing for the worst. But Mrs. Jenkins' voice, though breathless, was filled with a joyous sob. "Sarah, the power, it's on. The lights just came back on. Leo's ventilator. It's humming. He's breathing easily now." A wave of profound, overwhelming relief washed over Sarah, so potent it almost buckled her knees. The world, which had been a suffocating, silent nightmare, suddenly hummed with the quiet symphony of electricity. The sound of that ventilator, a steady, rhythmic sigh, was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of pure, unadulterated gratitude. The battle wasn't just won, it was won just in time. Back home, Leo's tiny chest rose and fell with a newfound ease, the machine providing the steady, life-giving breaths he so desperately needed. The stifling heat began to dissipate as the air conditioner roared back to life, slowly bringing comfort back into their once tortured home. It was over. The immediate horror was finally over. The aftermath for the HOA was swift and brutal. Within hours of the power being restored and the story dominating national news, the pressure became unbearable. Mr. Peterson, the HOA president, along with 2 other board members who had vehemently supported the power cut, tendered their immediate resignations. Their public apology, issued via a hastily called press conference, was a robotic recitation of regret, devoid of genuine emotion, and entirely too late. "We acknowledge our severe misjudgment," Peterson mumbled, his eyes darting nervously. "We extend our sincerest apologies to Ms. Miller and her son, and to the entire community." No one believed them. The damage was done, their reputation irrevocably shattered. The public, spurred by the attorney's threat and the sheer moral outrage, demanded justice. Legal actions followed swiftly. The civil rights attorney, true to his word, filed a class action lawsuit not just for Sarah, but for other residents who had suffered under the HOA's draconian rules. Separate complaints were lodged with state agencies, investigating potential negligence and discrimination. The HOA's legal team was overwhelmed, their reserves quickly depleted by the sheer volume of litigation. More significantly, the community, now galvanized and empowered, refused to let the incident fade. A new wave of residents, inspired by Sarah's courage, stepped forward, demanding drastic policy changes. Petitions circulated calling for term limits for board members, stricter oversight, and a review of all bylaws to ensure humanitarian considerations outweighed bureaucratic rigidity. New, more compassionate and community-focused individuals eventually took over the HOA board, promising transparency and empathy. The notorious utility disruption clause was swiftly removed, and a new protocol was established for residents facing financial hardship, ensuring no one would ever again suffer such a devastating and inhumane cutoff. Liberty Estates began a slow, arduous process of healing and reform, learning a painful lesson about the true meaning of community. For Sarah and Leo, life slowly began to normalize, though it was forever changed. Leo, despite the terrifying ordeal, made a full recovery thanks to the quick action and the ultimate restoration of power. The GoFundMe campaign swelled, providing not just for his immediate medical bills but also a fund for future care, a crucial safety net Sarah had never dared to dream of. The outpouring of community support was immense and enduring. Neighbors, once distant, became close friends. Mrs. Jenkins brought over home-cooked meals for weeks. Strangers, moved by the story, sent cards and gifts for Leo. The experience, while harrowing, forged an unbreakable bond between Sarah and her community, revealing the compassionate heart that lay beneath the HOA's rigid exterior. Sarah, herself, emerged from the crucible a different woman. The desperate, anxious mother had transformed into a fierce, articulate advocate. She had faced down an unfeeling system and won, not just for herself and Leo, but for countless others. Her voice, once timid, was now strong and resonant. She began speaking at local events, sharing her story, urging people to pay attention to their local governance, to demand accountability, and to never allow bureaucracy to overshadow basic human empathy. The lessons learned were profound. The fragility of life, the resilience of the human spirit, and the immense power of collective action. This experience, while born of unimaginable fear, had shown her the depths of her own strength and the boundless capacity for good in ordinary people. Looking back, Sarah often reflected on that sweltering, dark afternoon. It was a stark reminder that sometimes the biggest battles are fought not with fists, but with truth, with a camera, and with the unwavering belief that every life holds immeasurable value. Her final message, often delivered with a quiet, resolute gaze into the camera, became a beacon of hope. Never be afraid to speak your truth, especially when it's for someone who can't speak for themselves. Empathy isn't just a feeling, it's an action. And when we stand together, even the most formidable walls of indifference can crumble. Always choose life. Always choose humanity.